Help us improve YouTube to transcript 30-second survey? Tell us what you actually do with this transcript so we can stop guessing and build the features you need. Closed transcript of Trump tries Navy food. His honest words shock the sailor's author. Elite story like, subscribe, copy link, WhatsApp, X Messenger, email, pocket. The Navy base in Norfolk, Virginia, was buzzing with unusual excitement. Word had spread that President Donald Trump was visiting to meet sailors and tour the facility. For weeks, preparations were underway. Flags hung neatly, floors polished, and uniforms pressed sharp. But there was one detail that intrigued everyone. Trump had asked to eat what the sailors ate. Commander Grace Harlow, a respected 40-year-old officer known for her fairness, wasn't sure what to think. Most presidents stick to formal dinners, she said to her junior officer, Lieutenant Marcus Reed. But if he wants real Navy food, he'll get it. The galley staff, men and women who cooked daily meals for thousands, felt both nervous and proud. Among them was Petty Officer Carla Dawson, 28, who had grown up in a small town before joining the Navy as a cook. For her, preparing meals wasn't just duty. It was a way of caring for her fellow sailors. "Do you think he'll actually eat it?" one sailor whispered. Carla smiled, though her heart raced. "If he does, he's going to see what we really live on." The announcement spread like wildfire. Sailors wondered what the president would say. Some hoped he would praise the food. Others feared he'd mock it. None could predict that his reaction would leave the room silent. Trump, meanwhile, on Air Force One, looked over the briefing. He put the folder down and said quietly, "If I'm going to meet them, I want to know what their life feels like, even in something as small as a meal." What began as a simple request for Navy food was about to become something far deeper than anyone expected. Carla Dawson woke at 4:30 a.m. sharp, tying her dark hair back and slipping into her white Navy cook's uniform. She wasn't just preparing another breakfast today. She was preparing food for the commander-in-chief. She walked into the galley, greeted by the familiar clang of pans and the hum of the giant ovens. The Navy galley wasn't glamorous. Industrial trays, simple ingredients, and strict schedules. But this morning, the crew worked with unusual precision. "What's the menu?" asked Seaman Lopez, still half asleep, but trying to mask his nerves. "Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, canned green beans, and peach cobbler," Carla replied. "Standard." The president wanted exactly what the sailors eat. No upgrades. The team exchanged glances. This wasn't steak and lobster presidential dining. This was comfort food bulk prepared for thousands with recipes written for practicality, not luxury. Carla moved quickly, seasoning the meatloaf, adjusting the potatoes, and checking the ovens. She wasn't trying to impress with gourmet flair. She wanted honesty. If he eats this, she thought, he'll know how we live. As the crew worked, conversations turned emotional. Lopez muttered, "My mom thinks I eat like a king here. If only she knew it's canned beans half the time." Carla paused, remembering her childhood. Her family once relied on food stamps. To her, even simple meals had dignity. "Food isn't just food," she whispered. "It tells a story." By 11 a.m., trays were lined, dishes steaming, and the galley spotless. The crew's nerves grew heavier with each passing minute. Meanwhile, outside, hundreds of sailors gathered, awaiting the president's arrival. The meal wasn't just food anymore. It had become a test, a moment of truth. The motorcade rolled into the Navy base, security tight, cameras flashing. Sailors stood at attention in crisp uniforms, the air thick with anticipation. Trump stepped out, waving, his familiar presence both commanding and approachable. He shook hands, saluted back at sailors who greeted him, and cracked a few light jokes that loosened the mood. Commander Grace Harlow escorted him. "Mr. President, welcome. The crew is honored to have you." Trump nodded. "Thank you, Commander. I'm honored to be here, and I hear we've got lunch waiting." That line alone stirred whispers through the ranks. Unlike the usual staged photo ops, he had insisted on eating in the galley, side by side with sailors. No silverware sets, no fine china, just trays and benches. Inside the galley, Carla and her team froze when they saw him enter. Trump scanned the room, then smiled. "Smells good. Who's the chef?" Carla, heart pounding, stepped forward. Petty Officer Carla Dawson, sir. He extended his hand. Well, Carla, let's see what you've got. The sailors lined up with their trays, and Trump joined them. No special line, no reserved seat. He grabbed a tray, accepted a scoop of meatloaf, potatoes, and beans, just like everyone else. When he sat down at a long table filled with sailors, silence fell. Phones captured every second. Trump picked up his fork, looked at the plate, and chuckled. This looks like something my mom used to make. The sailors laughed nervously, but no one knew what his first bite and his first words would reveal. The room fell so quiet you could hear forks scraping against trays. Every sailor's eyes locked on Trump as he cut into the meatloaf. He raised the bite, looked around, and with a grin said, "Moment of truth, folks." He chewed slowly. For a few seconds, no one dared breathe. Then he nodded, swallowed, and leaned back. You know what? This is better than I expected. Tastes real, honest food. The tension broke. Laughter rippled through the room. But Trump wasn't done. He pointed at the tray. It's not fancy. It's not a 5-star meal, but that's the point, isn't it? This is what you live on. This is part of your sacrifice. Carla Dawson's hands trembled as she listened. She had spent years serving these meals, often hearing complaints from sailors, tired of repetition. For the first time, she felt someone truly saw the meaning behind the food. Trump continued eating, trying the potatoes, then the green beans. Canned beans. I grew up on these. They may not look like much, but when you've got a long day ahead, this keeps you going. A young sailor at the table, barely 19, spoke nervously. Sir, do you really like it? Trump looked him in the eye. Son, I've eaten food worth hundreds of dollars a plate, but right now this matters more because it's the same food you eat. That makes it special. Silence fell again, not out of awkwardness, but from the weight of his words. For the first time, the sailors realized this meal wasn't about taste. It was about recognition. Carla Dawson leaned against the counter, watching from a distance. She'd never imagined the President of the United States would eat her cooking, let alone praise it. Growing up, her family often had little. Dinner was canned soup, peanut butter sandwiches, or whatever her mom could put together. Carla had once been embarrassed by it, but now those same humble meals seemed connected to something bigger. He actually gets it, she whispered. Lopez, her fellow cook, nudged her. I thought he'd spit it out. Guess you just got presidential approval. Carla laughed nervously. It's not about approval. It's that he sees what we go through. Trump continued talking with sailors, asking them questions, not just about food, but about their families, their deployments, their struggles. He wanted to know what kept them going, what worried them most. A sailor confessed, "Sometimes it's the little things, sir, like a warm meal after a long watch. Makes you feel human again." Trump nodded. That's the heart of it. A meal is never just a meal. It's fuel, but it's also comfort. Carla felt tears sting her eyes. For years, she'd been overlooked. Her work taken for granted. Today, someone had said out loud what she'd always believed, that even a simple tray of meatloaf could carry meaning. Still, she wondered, was this just talk, or would his words actually matter after he left? After finishing his cobbler, Trump placed his fork down. The cameras were still rolling, sailors hanging on to every word. He leaned forward, his voice quieter now. I need to tell you something honest. I know some of you think this food is plain. Some of you get tired of it. I understand that. But let me say this. It may not win a chef's award, but it carries something far greater. The spirit of sacrifice. The sailors exchanged glances. No president had ever spoken about Navy food like this. Trump continued. Every bite reminds me of what you give up. Luxury, comfort, family dinners. You eat here, so the rest of America can eat at home in peace. That makes this food priceless. A hush swept the room. Carla's throat tightened. Lopez muttered, "Did he just call our meatloaf priceless?" One sailor, Chief Petty Officer Daniels, who had served for 25 years, stood and said firmly, "Sir, I've eaten this food more times than I can count. I never thought I'd hear a president call it sacrifice. Thank you. Trump nodded, visibly moved. You serve this country with your lives. The least I can do is sit with you and eat what you eat. And I'll tell you something today. This meal means more to me than the finest banquet. The words settled deep into every heart. They weren't rehearsed. They weren't political. They were raw, unfiltered honesty. And that's what shocked the sailors most. The sailors left the galley in waves, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Some laughed at the surreal moment. Others stood quiet, reflecting, but all of them felt the weight of the president's words. Carla remained by the counter, still stunned. She thought of her late father, a factory worker who had always said, "Respect comes in small ways, not grand gestures." If he were alive, he would have smiled at what had just happened. Commander Grace Harlow approached Trump. "Mr. President, I've never seen the crew this affected by a speech." Trump shrugged. "Grace, sometimes the truth is simple. You honor people by seeing them. Today I saw them." A young sailor, nervous but bold, asked Trump for a photo. Soon, dozens lined up. Not stiff official photos, but casual ones with smiles and laughter. Trump shook their hands, told jokes, even teased Lopez for spilling a little gravy on his tray. Later, when the sailors gathered in their quarters, the conversation wasn't about politics, policies, or even military strategy. It was about meatloaf and a president who had chosen to eat it with them. Some admitted they'd felt forgotten, like their work was invisible. Today, that invisibility had lifted. Carla wrote in her notebook that night, "Food can carry dignity when someone recognizes it." Today, the president reminded us of that. But none of them knew the story of that simple meal would travel far beyond the base, and its ripple would inspire more than just sailors. As the meal wrapped up, Trump stood shaking hands with sailors one by one. When he reached the galley counter, Carla Dawson found herself face to face with him. Her palms were sweaty, but she stood tall. "You cook this, right?" Trump asked. "Yes, sir," Carla replied, her voice trembling. "With my team." Trump smiled warmly. "Well, you've done something more than cook. You reminded me of my mother's kitchen. That's a gift." Carla swallowed hard. She wanted to thank him, but words caught in her throat. She managed, "Sir, we try to make it feel like home, even if it's not." Trump nodded, visibly moved. "That's exactly what it feels like. Home. Even here." The sailors nearby went quiet, realizing the significance of the exchange for Carla, who had spent years being overlooked. It felt like her work suddenly mattered. After Trump moved on, Lopez whispered to her, "You just made history." The president compared your meatloaf to his mom's. Carla laughed nervously, brushing a tear away. "I didn't do this for history. I just wanted them to feel cared for." But deep down, she knew this moment was different. Trump's words had given meaning to what she had always believed, that food, no matter how simple, carried comfort and dignity. Later that afternoon, Trump asked to sit again with a smaller group of sailors. This time, the cameras were gone. Just him, a few young sailors, and Commander Grace Harlow. He asked them to share their stories. One sailor, Petty Officer Ramirez, spoke about missing the birth of his daughter during deployment. Another, Seaman Harris, admitted how tough it was eating the same meals daily, but said the galley staff always kept spirits up. Trump listened closely, not interrupting. Finally, he said, "Back in New York, people think Navy food is a joke. But sitting here, I realize it's not about the food. It's about the people who prepare it and the people who share it." The sailors exchanged glances, surprised at his sincerity. Grace added softly, "Sir, sometimes just sitting with us does more than speeches ever could." Trump nodded. "That's why I came to remind myself, and maybe the whole country, that service isn't just on the battlefield. It's in the small things, even in the galley." Carla, listening from the kitchen, felt a lump in her throat. She had always wondered if her work truly mattered. Now, hearing those words, she knew it did. When Trump finally left the galley, the sailors gathered outside to see him off. They clapped, not because protocol demanded it, but because they genuinely felt moved. The applause grew louder, echoing across the base. Trump turned back, raising a hand. No, no, the applause isn't for me. It's for you, for what you do every day. The sailors erupted in cheers. Carla stood in the back, tears streaming down her cheeks. She had never felt such pride in her work. Grace leaned toward Trump and whispered, "You may not realize it, but you just gave this crew something they'll never forget." Trump smiled faintly. "Neither will I." As the motorcade pulled away, the sailors kept talking about what had happened. Not about politics, not about speeches, but about meatloaf, honesty, and being seen. Carla returned to the galley, sitting quietly at a table where Trump had eaten. She touched the tray he'd used, as if it carried part of the moment. Sometimes, she thought, respect comes from sharing something as simple as a meal. Little did she know, the story was only beginning to spread. Within days, the world would hear about the president who ate Navy food and the sailors who were forever changed by his words. The next morning, sailors began posting photos and short clips online. Trump eating meatloaf, laughing with sailors, shaking hands with Carla. Within hours, hashtags trended. Number Navy meal, number meatloaf moment, and number serving sacrifice. News outlets picked it up. Commentators were shocked, not by policy, but by the raw simplicity of the act. One headline read, "President chooses Navy galley over banquet. Calls meal priceless." Carla's phone buzzed. Non-stop. Friends from her hometown messaged her. Her mother cried over the phone. "Honey, your food was on TV." The president compared it to his mother's cooking. Carla smiled, but she also felt humbled. "It wasn't about me, Mom. It was about all of us." Meanwhile, sailors across different bases began sharing their own galley stories. Photos of simple meals, spaghetti, chili, sandwiches popped up online, each carrying the message, "This is what we live on. This is our sacrifice." The moment had sparked something unexpected, pride in the small, overlooked details of Navy life. And for Carla Dawson, the cook who once felt invisible, it was proof that sometimes the simplest acts, serving food, sharing a table, could ripple across the world. 2 days later, Carla sat in her bunk scrolling through her phone. A message popped up from her younger brother back in Ohio. "Sis, I saw you on the news." Dad would have been so proud. Carla's eyes filled with tears. Her father had passed away before ever seeing her in uniform. He used to tell her, even the smallest jobs matter if you put your heart into them. For years, she doubted him, thinking cooking in the Navy was too small, too unnoticed. But now the whole world was talking about Navy food and her role in it. Later that day, Grace Harlow stopped by the galley. She handed Carla a sealed envelope. "What's this?"
Carla asked.
"A note," Grace said with a smile. "From the president." Carla's hands shook as she opened it. Inside, written in bold handwriting, were the words, "Carla, thank you for reminding me of home and for reminding the world that sacrifice is served on every tray. Donald J. Trump." Carla sat down hard on a bench, clutching the letter to her chest. Lopez peeked over her shoulder and whistled. "Guess you just became the Navy's most famous cook." But to Carla, it wasn't about fame. It was about validation that her father had been right all along. By the end of the week, talk shows and newspapers across America debated the Navy food moment. Some dismissed it as a publicity stunt, but others said it revealed something deeper, that respect and recognition often lived in small gestures. Veterans called into radio stations reminiscing about their own galley meals. One Vietnam vet said tearfully, "I remember beans and rice in the mess hall. We used to complain, but now hearing the president honor it, it feels like someone finally understood." In schools, teachers used the story to talk about humility and service. Kids wrote essays titled, "What a Simple Meal Means." Even Carla's old high school invited her to speak virtually. She told the students, "It's not about being famous. It's about remembering that your smallest efforts can carry the biggest meaning." Meanwhile, on the Navy base, morale was higher than anyone could remember. Sailors stood a little taller in line at the galley. Food that once seemed boring now carried pride, and all of it had begun with one unexpected meal. Commander Grace Harlow sat in her office, replaying the week in her mind. She had served for nearly 2 decades and seen countless presidential visits. They were usually polished, rehearsed, and distant. But this one felt different. She pulled out her journal and wrote, "Leadership isn't about speeches or ceremonies. It's about presence." Today, a president eating meatloaf reminded us all that dignity can be found in the simplest acts. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from a retired admiral. He'd seen the footage and wrote, "Grace, I don't know how you pulled this off, but you gave the Navy something priceless. Pride." Grace leaned back in her chair, smiling faintly. She thought of her younger self, fresh out of the academy, believing leadership meant giving orders. Now she understood it differently. Leadership, she whispered, sometimes means sitting down with your people and eating what they eat. A week later, Carla was called unexpectedly to the commander's office. She walked nervously, clutching the president's letter in her pocket. Grace greeted her warmly. "Carla, the White House reached out again. They're inviting you to a special dinner." Carla froze. "Me? Why me?" "Because you reminded the president of home. Because you reminded us all of dignity." Carla hesitated. "I'm just a cook." Grace's voice was firm. "You're not just anything. You represent thousands who serve quietly every day." That night, Carla called her mother. Tears flowed on both ends of the line. "Mom, they want me at the White House." Her mother whispered through sobs, "Your father's words came true, honey. The smallest jobs matter." For the first time, Carla allowed herself to believe it. Weeks later, Carla walked nervously into the White House dining room. The chandeliers sparkled. The tables were lined with fine china. "So different from the Navy galley." Trump greeted her with a smile. "Carla, the cook who made me remember my mom's kitchen. Glad you're here." He seated her among decorated officers and dignita.